Welcome to Flashes of Insight. My guest on the program today is Father Hans Zollner. He's a professor of psychology at the Gregorian University in Rome, which is a distinguished Jesuit university that's been going for over 400 years. He also has a special interest in and is internationally regarded for the priority of the work that he does in safeguarding. And he has had more impact across the church than any other single individual. Perhaps begin by saying, what do you think at the moment is the state of safeguarding in the church around the world? Is it, have we learnt anything and are we doing better? Or are we taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back?
Now, Mick, I think the situation has changed over the last 10 years or so, mainly in 2 regards. First of all, I think the main change is that the issue of child sexual abuse and abuse of vulnerable adults has reached every corner of the world in the attention that is given within the church and sometimes also in society at large. And that wasn't the case 10 years ago, not even 3 years ago, I would say. Every country in which you can read papers, in which you can follow internet news, has now news about that, and people are aware that this is and will be a pressing issue. The second thing is that there have been a number of initiatives, beginning with the time when Benedict was Pope in 2010, with restrictions on law, with 2012, with the first big meeting of bishops on this topic, bishops from all over the world. Then the creation of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors in 2014, and other major legal canonical restrictions and norms that have been introduced. And in the area of safeguarding, we can say that the Church is really engaged in many countries, not in all. And that is the difficulty to answer your question straightforward, because the Church is very different in various parts of the world. You can't easily compare the situation in Papua New Guinea to the one in Mexico, to the one in Malawi, or to the one in the United States of America.
Yes. What would you say, given the broad circumference of your reach, are there key learnings in various parts of the world that would be good to generalize? In other words, are there success stories that need to be more broadly shared?
I would say the most important areas where we have learned as a church, but not to the same extent in all countries, are the following. First, keep victims first, listen to victims. If any person in the church and any responsible person in the church, any leader in the church, listen to victims of abuse, then he or she changes the attitude, changes the behavior, and becomes committed to do whatever can be done to do justice to victims, to secondary victims, that is their family members, their friends, their parish faithful, and whoever in the schools, colleagues, companions, and so forth. And where this has happened, the Church has certainly, in a respective country, has done enormously better than in those countries where victims have not yet listened, have been listened to according to their needs, according also to their expectations. This is the first one. I mean, we cannot work in the area of safeguarding if we don't really take seriously the concerns of victims. The second is, I would say, it is important that safeguarding is not dealt with like an add-on to diocesan administration, to religious provinces' offices. It is not something that should be switched on and switched off according to the needs or when people forget about it. Safeguarding has to be built in our normal proceedings, in our planning, in our pastoral activities, in our educational work, and not as something that comes like something optional. It has to become an integral part of it. And I know at least of provinces, religious congregations, of dioceses where this, I mean, to the best of my knowledge and in my opinion, really happens. And you can see that it is to the best of all, first of all, to the best of victims, but also to the best of the diocese, because yes, it is difficult to invest money, to invest personnel, to invest time to do that. But you learn enormously, and you are really, I mean, giving a much better witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ when you go along that line.
Mm. Now, as this has unfolded, do you think the ways we go about safeguarding have changed or improved?
I would say they have improved. Certainly there is a learning process in some countries, including my own here in Germany. Official, even government officers talk about the leading role of the church in terms of safeguarding, leading the way for other institutions, other religions, other denominations, and sometimes even the state itself. So we have learned a lot, but as I say, the main question remains whether this is something on the sidelines or whether and how much it comes into the main direction and the mainstream work. And there, a lot of work has still to be done in terms of changing attitudes, of changing convictions, because still there is the perception that we don't want to engage too much with it, because then people focus even stronger on the Catholic Church. We know that abuse is happening in all quarters of society, so why should we go forward while others don't engage as much as we do? However, in terms of professional preparation of personnel in screening, when people are coming for job interviews, in terms of ongoing formation, a lot is going on. Unfortunately, many people don't realize that hundreds of thousands of people around the globe are trained by the Catholic Church in safeguarding every year. But this is something we need to really commit to seriously and persistently, because this is not going to go away.
This is of course a particular instance of something far more broadly impacting the church, which is the degree of transparency and accountability in general, which is across other fields than safeguarding, finance, appointments, promotions, all that is there. And I wonder what you think of this, that I think some of the best progress that's been made in forcing the hand of the church has been the accusation by civil authorities that the church has basically been incapable of managing its own affairs. And then comes the intervention of police and judicial authorities, which in a sense force the church to improve its performance as far as safeguarding issues are concerned, and setting up of procedures and protocols and appropriately qualified people to do this. This is, in many respects, I think of my own country, it's been forced on us. It's and I'm sure that that's true all over the world. It's been forced on us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't dispute the fact that in many countries, I wouldn't say in all countries, but in many countries, the church has moved on only because of media attention, which was, in my opinion, even more influential on that rather than judicial actions, because in some countries that didn't happen, but media were taking on these issues surely. And unfortunately, it's very sad to say, but only because of a certain kind of public pressure in some countries, the church has really taken this seriously. However, I would warn against expectations about judicial systems bringing the church to deal with this more adequately, because unfortunately, in many parts of the world, in many countries, state authorities, police, law enforcement in general are really not really helpful, because they themselves are sometimes involved in inconsistent behavior, and their own moral authority is very tempered. So it is a mix of I would say, external pressure and the ongoing attention that, for example, Pope Francis is given to this issue that has gradually started a process of coming to grips with a situation which some years ago people said it will go away, we will weather the storm and so forth. But people realize now, especially after the so-called summit from February last year, which Pope Francis had called for, that had as topics precisely those concepts that you were referring to, responsibility, transparency, and accountability. So the Pope himself has put it on the agenda of the Church in the first place. And I think we have learned a lot from those institutions and those countries where there are golden standards for this, but it is not easy to implement that in countries where, for whatever reason, and I talk about many countries in some continents that find it very difficult to cope with concepts like accountability, because the chieftain or the leader of a tribe or the leader of a clan or of a caste cannot be accused of anything because of their role. Yeah. So where you have this mix between religious and traditional cultural concepts of, for example, power, it is very difficult to introduce the idea that even a priest, even a bishop, have to live up to their own responsibilities and be accountable to somebody outside their reach.
Perhaps one final question. The whole world for the last 3 or 4 months has been completely swamped by something that's taken up to 30,000 lives in the country that you live in, which is Italy. How many people died in Germany?
About 8,000.
Yeah. So, you know, the whole world is just absorbed with this issue at the moment, which, you know, we hope comes under control quickly. But where do you see things going with safeguarding? Is it more of the same, or are there some quantum leaps we have to take?
Yeah, I think it is quite evident to many who are working in this field of safeguarding of minors and vulnerable adults that the topic has been relegated down the line because of the focus, the almost unique and single focus on health and economy now. In this crisis, many people are aware that a lockdown means exposing children and vulnerable adults, especially women in violent relationships, to higher risk than before. And the irony is that in this very moment, when these vulnerable people, minors of age or adults, need more help, the social systems can't intervene as much as they would need, because precisely for the reason that people can't easily communicate from violent situations. They can't report. They have no place to go because the schools are closed, because social services are shut down. So this is one obvious outcome of the and consequence of this crisis, of this moment, that we probably will see, and we have some numbers about that, violence has increased at home. And we can presume that this is not only the case in terms of physical violence, but also of sexual and psychological violence. The second outcome will be that the decrease of income of foundations because of difficulties with the markets and so forth will have certainly a mid and maybe even long-term effect on the funding of child safety and any safeguarding policies, because most of our organizations, including the Center for Child Protection of the Gregorian University, which I'm heading, depend on external funding. And it is, it is foreseeable that people won't have the money, or they will cut down on expenses, and the same will be a temptation also for the church as in society at large, because of course, if there is less money, you have to cut in all areas. I do hope that we in the church, we will go another way and really keep on investing in this, because this is for the safety of those who need most protection. And this is certainly in the line of the gospel, when Jesus calls us to really live up to our mission, so that the little ones can approach him, even in the face of other challenges.
Well, let's hope that our conversation gets wide coverage so that we can keep the awareness of the challenge before people's eyes. Hans Zollner, many thanks for your time.